Today in the Plant Cunning podcast, we are thrilled to have Lisa Fazio, a local herbalist and author and astrologer. How are you today, Lisa?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing great. Doing
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, we were super excited to hear about another person on the plant path who's doing, a lot of the stuff that we're into, like the astrology and magic and working with plants and herbalism. And you're within an hour from us here in central New York. And so it's really a pleasure to get to know you a little bit better and to talk with you today. So thanks for doing this.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. And I'm excited too, because I knew about the Plant Cunning podcast, but I had no idea that you were this close to me.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, it's awesome. So just to ground us into place a little bit, I wanted to ask you, what is one thing or what are a couple things that you love about where we live?
Oh, yeah. So I am deeply in love with place. And I like to think that place is maybe a little bit in love with me. It's been a long relationship. So, as you both know, I grew up in the Utica area. And now I live in about 20 minutes north of Utica in the Adirondack foothills. So I've been in this region for my entire life. And so were my parents. And my grandparents were Italian immigrants on my father's side. And then on my mom's side, Irish immigrants who had also been here. The Irish were here a little bit longer than the Italians. So it's a post-industrial community. And there's a lot of wildness here.
Yeah.
And that means not just plants and other species, but also there's a lot of human wildness here that I really appreciate. And I love my community. I love my rural community, and I love Utica, New York. It's a refugee center. It's one of the major refugee centers in the United States, as a matter of fact. And just there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, cool. It's a really beautiful area and a really cool city. There is so much going on. And yeah, like you said, the nature and the people,
there's a lot going on, but not in the sense of like, if you go to a more progressive area. I mean, this is not progressive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We don't have a Whole Foods. We don't have a Trader Joe's. What's
we've
that?
We've got Amish people with their vegetable stands.
We've got vegetable stands, and we do grow a lot of our food. We have very rich soil where we are.
Nice.
We're on the West Canada Creek, which is really a river. So we're on basically the ancient floodplain here.
Awesome.
Nice.
So very rich soil and relatively unpolluted. And in fact, the Mohawk River is polluted, but up here in the foothills, because it's post-industrial and pretty much everybody left a long time ago, this river has actually been tested by the DEC, and it's relatively clean. So it's under the level of toxic, which is major
increasingly rare in the
increasingly rare. So yeah,
unfortunately.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Like I was born in Ithaca, but I was raised in Western Pennsylvania, which is a similar, Rust Belt, the Appalachian Plateau, Allegheny Plateau, similar like environment, but it's really polluted there. So it's nice.
We're fortunate. I mean, we're fortunate in a way, although we're not fortunate in the way that, people don't have jobs. It's hard to find jobs. And so a lot of people have moved. But the other thing about living here is that, we can live very minimally.
Right.
Not a lot of money.
Right.
Yeah.
Which has given myself and my partner a lot of freedom. So land is still really inexpensive. I'm afraid to say too much because I kind of don't
I know.
Right. We don't,
out about it.
don't want to blow open the secret, but that's why
Yeah.
we're here too. I mean, we could afford it, and that gives us leeway to do what we want to do with stuff like this podcast and all that kind of stuff. So
what brought you to the plant path?
Yeah, so I started learning about herbs when I was about 22. So I'm 52. So it's been about 30 years. And I would say that it was a series of coincidences, and just circumstantial things. But part of the drive was, both my health and the health of one of my children. I have 4 children. And I had a daughter with chronic ear infections and respiratory infections. And I grew up with asthma. I actually have a mast cell activation syndrome, which took me a long time to figure out, but lots of allergies. So, but it was really her because she was sick a lot, and we didn't have health insurance at the time. And we had been sent to an ear, nose, throat specialist who said she needed tubes in her ears. It was very expensive surgery that we couldn't afford. And we were trying to figure out how we were going to do that. And somebody had said, just a random like old friend had said, oh, try garlic oil in her ears. And honestly, now, if somebody had said that to me, I would probably have had to do like a bunch of research and like checked in with a bunch of people. I don't know that I would have been just like, okay, but I was at that time in my life. And so we tried it, and she never had another ear infection.
wow.
Amazing.
We did other things as well. So then there were some like other coincidental things. My first herb teacher, who has since passed, her name was Sue Cross. She was a local woman who, well, I can tell a little story if you want me to.
Yeah, I love
please.
that.
So this is like around the same time, and my husband and I went down the road here to this watering hole, like a waterfall, and decided that it was posted, but we were like, well, that can't mean us, right? So we went in, and we were actually skinny dipping, and a cop came down and was like, you got to get out of here, and this is posted. And he was like, but you might be able to go talk to the landowner and say, maybe they won't press charges. Ooh. And we were like, well, who are they? And it was like adjacent, it was a farm adjacent. And we went in over to their house, and it realized there was this whole store there called Mystical Reflections. So it was like this really new agey thing that the woman of the household had started this shop. And I got talking to her, and she was like, oh, there's going to be an herbalist teaching here. Do you want to come to a class? And so I went to my first herb class, and that was with Sue Cross, who is actually from Bridgewater.
Okay.
Nice.
He was in the West Winfield. That's
right up the street.
Yeah.
So if you ask around there about Sue Cross, you'll probably learn a lot of stories about her. Again, like she didn't have, this is before the internet. And then, so she was self-taught. And so, I just basically started following her around everywhere.
Nice.
That's the way to do it.
And bought myself a plant ID book. And, the first thing she taught me about was just all the herbs in my cupboard. And she said, a lot of that stuff, most Americans just use salt and pepper and sugar, but a lot of us have other herbs in the cupboard. And that's true. That was true. And so she said, it doesn't even matter how old they are, just dust them off. And they've still got some potency. And so I just started making like basil tea, like sweet basil tea, and then just started adding a lot of herbs more to our food. And I grew up Italian American. So, I was accustomed to garlic, onions, and then basil was a big part of our cooking, oregano, parsley, but I branched into many other herbs. Oh, one of them was cinnamon. That was one
Yeah.
of them. I used to have because my daughter also used to get strep throat a lot. And we had her gargle with cinnamon.
Oh yeah, cool. So a little demulcent.
Yeah, it was great. I mean,
Yeah.
it's gross gargling with cinnamon, but it so
That's one of those amazing herbs that a lot of people overlook. But it's right there in most people's cabinets, and it's got.
and you can buy it in the grocery. The other thing
Yeah.
about a lot of those herbs that I first learned about, you could just buy them in the grocery store. I mean, you can with food stamps or whatever. Like you can just they're very accessible.
Yeah, I love that approach of of first teaching your herbal followers, like your herbal apprentices or whatever. In your case, you were just like following her around. So that's why I said followers, but about like kitchen herbs first. So the things that are already in your household and how to incorporate them more. I think like the kitchen witchery side of herbalism is a really good entry point.
Yep.
For sure.
So then I just then I kind of got hooked. And then another coincidence, actually, I went into the same store just to like quickly buy some tea or something that she had tea there. And I just ran in quick. And she was like, oh, I'm having an herb class tonight and it didn't fill. And I'll give it to you for half price, which was $10.
Nice.
And so she's like, do you want to come? And I was like, well, let me see, because I had like a newborn baby. And so I was like, let me run home and nurse the baby, and then I'll be right back. Let me check with my and so I went and that was Kate Gilday.
Oh, cool.
Who had just moved to the area. I didn't know who she was at the time, but who had just, and then I was like really hooked. And and I spent I'm still I feel like a student of Kate's, but I spent 20 years with her in both formal and very traditional informal daily working with her apprenticeship. So I worked for Woodland Essence, which is her company, gardening and foraging, and packing orders and making formulas for people. And then I started, once I got more proficient in my herbal studies, I started going with her to see clients. So I shadowed her for many years. But I would say it probably took me 10 years of study, practice, before I felt comfortable calling myself an herbalist.
Hard same. Yep.
Yeah, that's like a real apprenticeship, like a traditional apprenticeship. A lot of times you can just, do an apprenticeship in 3 months and then you're off on your own. But I mean, when you look back at a real apprenticeship takes a long time, and you're helping them with everyday tasks. It's like
you're helping them with everyday tasks, and you're forming a personal relationship with them. And that can be very challenging, because you form a relation. It's a real relationship. It's a student teacher relationship. It's a lot of times like a parent child relationship, and so like, I definitely challenged her a lot, and that sometimes I think, oh my God, I can't believe she put up with me. And then she challenged me a lot too. I mean, it's not easy. And we were in the same community. So, really, like, also there was a relationship between her and I, but then also with the greater community. And so then that also became kind of like a lot of responsibility, because, kind of like her reputation became my reputation. And then
Uh-huh.
like, right. So like there's all this like, that's very traditional.
Yes.
And it's very collectivist.
Yeah.
And I do think it's becoming rarer and rarer.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, it just makes me think of, well, we interviewed Rosita Arvigo, like the classic, case where she studied with Don Ligio for 17 years, but that's this, she took over his practice at, while he was still living actually,
Mhm.
but he was 100 years old. So,
Mhm.
but like that is traditional. That's the way it's always been done. But it's also it's a little scary too, because, if, her reputation is your reputation, it's like you get that reputation, but also if she does some things that are, untoward,
Mhm.
untoward, then that reflects back on you too.
Fortunately, fortunately she hasn't.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's also part of the process is like, is learning ethics.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And like in transparency,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
as well as effective communication or whatever you want to call it, like being able to, I mean, like I feel like this is one of the things like we're losing is like, oh, okay, like you have a question or an issue about something with your teacher or anybody, and like there's a skill to being able to initiate a dialogue about that, and then like process it, and then like also be able to move forward with the relationship and like almost like build on it,
Yeah.
or learn to get past it in some way or another. And I feel like with the internet and Instagram and, which I don't, I think there's really good things that have come out of that as well, but like also like Zoom,
Mhm.
apprenticeships.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah.
I just don't think you're ever going to get that.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes it goes bad,
Mhm.
right? Like
Right.
sometimes it doesn't work, and
Yeah.
sometimes things go to hell. And
Yeah.
that's part of it. Like it's not a controlled setting.
Yeah. And then also sometimes, like, well, think about Rosita, like with Don Eligio, like he, at a certain point, she realized some things that he did that she did not approve of, for instance, like fixing love magic stuff, and that she, had to deal with that. But at the same time, you don't just dispose of the person just because
You don't agree with them
you
on
don't
100%.
right. And that seems to be really common these days.
Also, you're supposed to have your like the part of it also is developing your own relationship with the practice.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like you're not them. You're not
Right.
like
Yeah.
carbon copy. So even though like you're connected with them, like my practice and some of my students' practices have gone in completely. I have one student who's a integrative nurse practitioner. Like, that was her.
Yeah.
So it's like I had one that really got into like poisoning medicines, and everybody's supposed to find, like, they're not supposed to do my practice, they're supposed to do their own practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Definitely.
sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I guess the what I was trying to get at was that people are so disposable these days. Like you throw the elder out with the bathwater sometimes. If they say,
Yeah, and some of that's like our cancel culture. I feel like
Yeah.
some of that, and then like, and we don't have methods of accountability. So
yeah, that's also important.
so there really is. So in a village setting, you have accountability because it's sort of built into the matrix of the village, right? Like you
Right.
can't get away like that's what I was saying. Like I couldn't get away from my community.
Yeah.
I have people in my community that have known me since I was 4 years old that are my clients,
Mhm.
right? That have come to me. So like these are people I grew up with, like they know everything about me, including all of the stupid shit I've done.
Yeah.
And all the people that hate me because of something that I did that I probably deserve, right? So it's like, but we don't, so you know, and even that's not really traditional. Like that's not like really being in a village, where you are accountable to everybody. And if you screw up, everybody's gonna know about it and you have to take accountability, make amends for it. So we don't have that.
Yeah.
And I've talked with other herbalists about this in different recent circumstances.
Mhm.
Where it's like, well, how do we hold this person accountable? Is it even up to who is it even up to hold this person accountable? And then, you like, it's just not possible. Like, we don't have a way. I'm not saying it's not possible. I take that back. I do think it's possible.
Mhm.
I just don't think we have a way. And
Yeah.
I don't personally think the way is more regulations,
Right.
Yeah.
more external regulations.
Yeah.
But I understand why people feel that way, that
Yeah.
we need
Yeah.
like some type of standardization, that we need some way of certifying, even though a lot of times those don't even work, because we know what happens with our medical professionals, that just because they
Right.
have licenses doesn't, but
Yeah. For sure.
so yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah. Relationships are difficult. Like being in community is difficult, but it's also like why we're here, I think, you know, and
And then like, what are the deal breakers in terms of like your relationship with a teacher?
Right.
Like, when do you really feel like, oh, I can no longer associate with that person or call that person my teacher anymore? Like where's the line? Is there even a line? And then I think one of the other questions is, can you separate the teacher from the teachings?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. And then the other part of it, right?
yeah.
Like, and then the other part of it is, you know, I really do believe we have to be able to hold paradox
Yeah. Yeah.
in this world in order to be creative. And I have a friend who we were talking about politics actually, but she was talking about a specific person, and she was saying, well, you know, we're all walking contradictions.
Mm.
And like, I feel like the idea that somebody should be consistently right or consistently politically correct or can have a consistent temperament all the time is very colonial and very patriarchal.
True.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so if somebody can't make a mistake or even have an opinion that may be missing some perspective, or what we feel like is missing some perspective, I don't know. It just seems very sterile to me.
For sure. That's a good word for it. Sterile.
Yeah, I think it's almost more industrial. It's like you know, like 20th century. Yeah.
Yeah, because life is messy.
It is.
Yeah.
Right. And we're all learning. Nobody knows for sure.
Nobody even knows what we're doing here. I mean, this
Right.
is always my thing. Like, I had a conversation with my husband the other day. I was like, I'm going to Google this. Like, does what happens after you die? Does anybody actually know? And Google even said, like, nobody actually knows. Like, there's a lot of people who think they know.
Yeah.
But nobody's ever done it and then come back and said, oh, this is what happens. I mean, I know we have these near-death experiences, but you know, it's not like 5 years later, somebody's like, guess what? You know, I was in the Pleiades the whole time. That's where you go. Like, we have no idea what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And even people who are like self-realized, for what I get from what they say is that you can't know that. All you can know is your true essential identity even. And that doesn't necessarily you know, it's not part of the subject object world.
It's non-dual. So it's non-dual.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's where we are. So to get back to the plant path.
Yeah.
So where'd you go? So you apprenticed for 20 years pretty much. I mean, you say you're still working, but it took you 10 years to really feel like you could call yourself an herbalist.
Yeah. And I studied with, you know, I did study with other teachers. Matthew Wood was I did apprenticeship with Matthew Wood. I did an apprenticeship with Pam Montgomery.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I did some different retreats and trainings with Stephen Buhner, David Dalton, I mean, yeah,
Yeah, a lot.
I've had
That's a lot.
many teachers over the years. I basically just like, signed up for everything, just kept following it, until
Yeah,
from one teacher to the next.
Mhm.
all the breadcrumbs.
Mhm. And then
I've had Mohawk. I feel like I should mention like also like that I've had primarily Mohawk teachers, Cecilia Mitchell, a woman by the name of who's since passed, Jackie Heyman, Joyce Benedict, Tom Porter. Tom Porter's been a very big, I don't know if you all know Tom Porter.
No.
no.
Well, he started a community in Fonda, New York, called Ganajahalege, which I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing right, but that was one of the primary locations for the Mohawk Nation. It was a large Mohawk village, pre-colonial Mohawk village. And so he started a community. He bought some land there, bought the old Palatine nursing home on the Mohawk River. And and I believe he's, I don't want to screw this up. I believe he's Bear Clan elder. He's a Bear Clan elder he came down from Akwesasne, which is the Mohawk reservation on the US Canadian border.
Mm.
And so he did a lot of farming and hosted a lot of workshops. They had a yearly strawberry festival there, and he did some Mohawk language courses. And he invited other teachers in there. So I went to everything I possibly could at his place. And now I believe he's retiring and moving back to Akwesasne. So I'm not sure if somebody's going to take over the Mohawk community or not, but yeah, he's great. You can find him on YouTube, and I just really recommend just listening. He's got a lot of interviews.
Cool.
Sweet.
Just listen to him.
Cool.
because-
Tom Porter.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
Okay.
Nice.
Awesome.
And so you also found time to study astrology during this period?
Yeah, and that sort of happened at the same time that when I met my husband, he was already studying astrology, and
Okay.
with a teacher, and her name is Tiny Schuster. She's
Okay.
like 95 now.
Wow.
And she still lives in St. Johnsville. So I started taking classes with Tiny. So my two main astrology teachers are Tiny Schuster and Karen Diamond.
Nice. Karen,
So, and I wasn't like, so the funny thing about both these things is like, I didn't wake up one day and be like, I want to be an herbalist. Like that was not like, I went to college for psychology. I wanted to be a social worker, but then like I had children, and I was like the pay rate for social workers is like $15,000 a year at the time. So I couldn't even afford to pay my babysitter. So, but I wasn't like, oh, I want to be an herbalist, or, oh, I want to become an astrologer. It was just sort of like kind of how it happened.
It was an interest. It just took off. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the best way. Or it's a good way. I mean, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's a good way. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess, because I didn't have to put a lot of thought into making big decisions about it. So just kind of, and the astrology was just like, I don't know, I just started doing it. And then, and the thing was like Tiny, like for like, everybody would pitch in, we'd go once a week and sit around her table, and she had a big dry erase board, and we did astrology by hand, like with a calculator with logarithms. So
Wow.
we did charts, and we'd go through the delineation, and it was like everybody would put money in the hat for us. So it would be like $5-10 or something. So it was like you really couldn't not do it. It was so
Yeah.
So do you integrate those practices?
Yeah, I do now. I did at first. I didn't. I was really focused on herbalism, and then I found myself like with my clients, I kept finding myself like so what's your sun sign? You know, like I was like, I need to, like, I kind of need to, and then I was like, wait a minute, I actually need to look at your chart because
Yeah.
I can tell a lot about what's going on here if I can see your transits, you know. So
Wow.
so I started
Putting birth
doing
time on the intake
doing
form.
like medical astrology or herbal, what do they call it? Astroherbology, I guess you
Yeah.
call it. And then I think I mentioned when we talked before that then I really kind of dove into that with Judith Hill,
Yeah.
and even went out to Portland for a conference, week-long training that she was doing there, and I really like her.
Yeah. She's great.
So those things also kind of pull themselves together.
Yeah, medical astrology is really fascinating, and it does give you a whole new perspective on everything. But if someone has some issues, then you can see more clearly what's actually going on.
Yeah, you know, and you could see when it'll pass too. Like you can
Yeah.
see, you can sometimes see the severity as well as like, you know, sort of ways out of it, you know, like,
Yeah.
oh, it's a Mars transit. You really need to do some like labor. You need to go hike up a mountain or something, and you'll probably feel a lot better, you know, or it's just, you know, it's a quick moon thing going through, or, you know, it's a hard transit. Like you need to really take care of your health for the next, you know, you need to rest. You need to, so.
And
Yeah, super helpful.
what I've been also studying with Judith, seeing like the elemental parts about it too. Like if the depression is like cold and moist or cold and dry, like those are very different things. They can look like a similar thing if you aren't paying attention. But it gives more context for energetics, you know, which
It
are
gives a lot of context for energetics, and those are really major things because so if you're going to like treat a cold dry, and like if somebody's got a cold dry and you try to treat with a cold dry herb or something, you're going to make it worse. The good thing is usually that's also very telling, right? So like if you're like, oh, okay, let's try something else.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So you're also, I mean, you've got so many interesting things going on. But so you're writing a book now about Italian folk magic and medicine.
Yes.
Want to tell us a little bit about that and your background and why you're doing that?
Yeah, I'm half, I think I've said this already, but I'm half Irish. Like all of my mother's ancestors were born in Ireland. And then half Italian. My both of my paternal grandparents were Italian immigrants, and I grew up in Utica, New York, which means I grew up in an Italian American community. So Italian folk medicine and magic was a part of my daily life, although I didn't know that that's what it was. Like it was
Right. Yeah. Who you grew up with. Yeah.
I grew up with it. And part of my plant work. So as I got into, okay, some context. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and being Italian was not a fun or cool thing. Italians were still really discriminated against at that time. And there are folk traditions were sort of something people were embarrassed of. So I rejected a lot of that culture. It was also it's a very collectivist, very family centered culture, which conflicts with American individualism.
Yeah.
So I rebelled, like many of my peers and my community did. But because I ended up falling into the plant path, it really sort of brought me back around to it again, because and also I have to thank Pam Montgomery for some of this, because she's the one who really like told me what was going on with some of the plants that I was sitting with and being with and working with, where I was like, this plant. And sometimes it was just the smell. Like I didn't even know the plant. Like it started really with just the smell or the taste of a plant. that I would be like, this is so, there's something so familiar about this plant. And she said, well, it's an ancestral plant, you know, and then I started realizing, oh, a lot of the plants, and this isn't just my experience. Many people that I work with have this experience, and many of my colleagues and whatnot. And so then I started, you know, what's going on here, you know, and then looking into the research of how our ancestral and epigenetic memories are stored, and how even like taste and smell, for example, is just one of the things that goes directly to our limbic brain, which is our memory center of our brain. And so, and also having studied Chinese 5-element, Ayurveda, those were some of the traditions that I was exposed to. I just really felt more comfortable or at home or familiar with like Greco-Roman European traditional Western herbalism. It was less of a reach for me. And I determined that was because I had the cultural context for it. Whereas like Chinese medicine, I don't have the cultural context for it. And I'm not saying, I've had some amazing Chinese medicine teachers who were not of Chinese descent. And so I think people can do it if they are really devoted to the practice, but I just wasn't. So I just kind of went with the low hanging fruit, which then, well, I could sort of shift here in the like narrative to also being a settler. So, and I mentioned I had Mohawk teachers, and I was in a lot, I worked with Mohawk people who were my friends. And I realized that I couldn't like really continue to connect with place if I didn't really understand as much as I could about my position here as a white European settler. And part of that was when I started really asking a lot of ancestral questions about who I am and how I got here, and my own history. And was asked by Native people to do that, to understand that one of the things that, and this isn't all Native people, and I don't speak for Native people, of course, but the message that I got was, you know, it would be really helpful if Europeans understood themselves, as well as brought into their consciousness the fact that there's been a lot of trauma here, and that we're positioned in a certain way in relationship to that, and that I don't need to be afraid of that, and I don't need to be in denial of that, and I can't be in denial of that if I'm going to truly have a relationship with my place.
Yeah,
because that's part of my relationship with my place.
For sure.
So that's really when I started like doing ancestral work.
And so what did you find when you started doing ancestral work, and what did that look like for you?
So I originally was like, well, I really want to know more about my Irish ancestors, because that was a mystery to me. My Irish grandmother died when my mother was 2. And it's been more generations of assimilation here than, and there's a lot of trauma as well because of the famine and whatnot. And so I was like, and also like it kind of got popular, like Celtic, like, you know, so I was like, ooh, you know, kind of like doing that, like, that, like, oh yeah. But, and that's where I started. But, you know, then really what happened was that my Italian ancestors were like, sorry, you but also so the thing is with my Italian heritage is that they were not my aunts. Italy, that's not my ancestors. I have family in Italy. Like I have a village that we visit there with cousins. Like that was not like it's ancestral, of course, but like I already had that. So again, it was like one of those other like things where it's like I could reach for something that I don't really know anything about, or I could lean into something that I've already been enculturated by.
Yeah.
And I was also like sort of unconsciously doing anyways. Like, just kind of part of who I am. So that's how I kind of ended up where I am right now. And then like, so part of the book is also, as I started doing this, realizing a few things. One is that assimilation is a major trauma, and that assimilation contributes to white supremacy. And that part of my position here is to do whatever I can to divest from white supremacy. And so to understand assimilation as something that homogenizes us.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And that there were a lot of younger generation Italian Americans who, and there are a lot of younger generation Italian Americans who did not have the upbringing that I had, did not have access to some of the original traditions.
Right. They were already assimilated.
Yeah. I mean, in the last, it's like I said, I was born in 1970. And so like, I would say like through the night, like once we got into like the 1990s and the early 2000s, like there's been a lot of assimilation of and dilution of Italian American culture. Not so much here in the Northeast. You can still find it, but much less than when I was young.
Yeah. I mean, I found that with like my lineage too. Like my mom's side of the family is Mennonite, Pennsylvania German, and like her grandfather spoke Pennsylvania Dutch. And like she was my mom was raised in that culture, but my grandparents started assimilating more into the modern culture, in the when she was a kid, so I never really had that like living tradition, whereas like our Amish neighbors, like they speak Pennsylvania Dutch to each other all the time.
Yeah.
But it's different. I mean, like when you have like the living enculturation and the living tradition, right there.
So do you have any examples of growing up of what that Italian American tradition looked like, and maybe some plants that were sort of a part of it?
Yeah, so it's not a standardized tradition.
Right.
Right. So this is some of it about like, there's no experts, but like, and it's familial as well as regional.
For sure.
So, and for me and most of us, I would say it's very entwined with folk Catholicism. So most of it is it looks like Catholicism. That's where we get benedicaria. That's an Italian American word. It's not from Italy. It just basically means blessing, or blessing way. And some people just call it the things we do.
Cool.
It's nice.
So it's like, it wasn't like, oh, now we're going to do some Italian American folk magic. It was like Nona in the kitchen with, oh no, don't put that over there. That, it's like a lot of what would be called superstitions. I mean, the most popular example is the cures for the malocchio, right? Which is the evil eye, right? With olive oil and water usually.
Mhm.
So I would say olive oil, like if we're going to talk about plants, like
Okay.
olive is definitely a sacred plant. Garlic,
Mhm.
uh, is a major sacred plant. And in fact, was one of the things that the Italian Americans were discriminated against,
Mm.
for wearing our garlic amulets. Uh,
Mhm.
so it's very common when you're going to school, especially if there's a flu or something going around, to have your nonna or your mother or somebody to make you a little garlic amulet and wear it around your neck. Well, no American kid wants to go to school with garlic around their neck.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so I would say like that's a lot of it was what we would call kitchen medicine. A lot of it was in the realm of what we would call women's work. Um,
Mhm.
so a lot of women held that that tradition.
Mm.
Other plants, I mean, obviously, basil is like very central. Yeah, there's tons of, all the parsley, oregano, dandelions.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, dandelions for
Those
sure.
are great.
Mhm.
But that garlic seems like a really potent. I mean, and it's you can look at it from like a more scientific perspective, like the garlic may be producing fumes, essential oils that keep the viruses
Yeah,
away. But you also have like the spirit of that garlic plant around
very
your,
protective.
yeah.
Well, also garlic is a plant of San Michele, who's Saint
Mm.
Michael, the
Mm.
archangel. And
Uh-huh.
so when we use garlic, we're also invoking, and he's a protective saint.
Yeah.
And so when we use garlic, we're also invoking San Michele.
That's awesome.
Mm.
So what are some of the entities that are worked with? Are mainly saints and archangels?
Mainly saints, yes, and La Madonna, the Blessed Mother,
Mm.
in all of her iterations. You know, if you go back far enough, you can find like gods and goddesses. You don't even actually have to go back that far, but like if you dive in beyond like the folk Catholicism, you're going to find the goddess Cibele on the mountain of Montevergine in Campania, where now there's a Madonna that is worshipped on the mountain, same mountain that the goddess Cibele was worshipped on. Dionysus or Bacchus is very important to both Italian American as well as Bacchus, more because Bacchus is the Italian iteration of Dionysus, but still in southern Italy. And I mean, there's also like sort of in between what you might call entities, or the streghe, the Yanara, what you might call witches, who were sort of we're able to work with supernatural powers. So, sort of in between that. But primarily we're talking about the saints in La Madonna.
Nice. And yeah, so that also makes sense. Just like looking at other traditions where like in South America, in the Caribbean, you have like the African diaspora, and you working with Catholic saints. I mean, even in the Nordic countries, you had like Saint Olaf was Thor. So I guess another question I have is just to get deeper into the blessing work, the Benedicaria.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you could elaborate a little bit more on like what that is? Like, what is Benedicaria?
Well, it's folk Catholicism.
Okay, so we're talking about it now. So like working with saints is Benedicaria.
It's part of it.
Okay, so all of it is
all of
Benedicaria.
it. Well, so this is one of the things, right, where it's like one of the things that's become very popular in, like, let's say the last 10 years is this idea of Italian witchcraft.
Okay. Again, and I confess that I don't really know anything about
So
this.
right. So it's like there's been a lot about Italian witchcraft.
Right.
And so the thing is, and witchcraft in general has become popular. A
Sure
lot of
has, yeah.
a lot of Italian witchcraft was, or the idea of Italian witchcraft was brought to the forefront by a person by the name of Raven Grimassi, who is highly criticized for basically making it up, like taking his ancestral stuff and making it up, because in the Italian diaspora, as well as in Southern Italy, this is mostly Southern Italian we're talking about, these are all of the folk practices are syncretized with folk Catholicism.
Right.
And the word strega, or witch, is an insult.
Right.
Right. So the healers, the village healers, are not going to call themselves that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes. There are people that might say, no, there is this, it's like there was this underground witchcraft tradition, but like the ethnographic information that we have, that is that there was not, or if it was underground, it was cloaked in Catholicism.
Right.
Mm.
And they
But
wouldn't
there's
call,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and they wouldn't call themselves strega. I mean, like, it's the same
But we do here now. So
Right.
so this is like some of what we talked about before I think we started recording, was like, we have Italian, right?
Mhm.
And then we have Italian American.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And you
Yeah.
have Catholicism, but then you have the Benedicaria.
Well, Benedicaria is folk Catholicism.
Yeah.
So Italian witchcraft, which would be stregoneria, that's the Italian word for witchcraft,
Mhm.
which, you know, if we're talking about witchcraft without Catholicism, that would be stregoneria. But I don't think there's a way you can separate that from, at least not culturally.
Mhm.
Okay, so like if you're just creating this your own thing and you want to separate it from the culture, that's something different. That's not ancestral reclamation or revivalism, because I mean, maybe it's some brand of it, but like you're definitely extracting, you're going to have to like tear those two things apart, or you have to bypass the Catholicism. So part of the problem with it is that people are very triggered by Catholicism and religion.
Yeah.
But Benedicaria, so like for instance, if you're doing a Benedicaria prayer or a cure for something, you are going to be you're going to be saying a Hail Mary, you're going to be praying to a specific saint, you're going to be praying to Jesus, you're going to be using those Catholic prayers.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I totally understand this impulse too, because like I was raised Christian, right? But I was also raised assimilated into modern, well, mostly, I was homeschooled and stuff, so it was a little different. But there's the urge very quickly to be like, screw all the Christianity. Let's go back to, well, what is there to go back to? Like Woden, so you go back there, but then there's not that living relationship either.
Mm.
And you've bypassed all of, like, if you look at Pennsylvania Dutch folk magic, like it's all about psalms. It's all about, you can't separate it from the Christian context. Yeah.
I mean, I think you can if you acknowledge that you're doing that, but I feel
Yes.
like
right.
Traditions are meant to be modified, and like I feel like we're not going back.
Right.
We're gathering like some of the original information that we got from our people. We're remembering our ancestors and remembering our ancestral source, and then we have to like create a relationship with it. So it's relational knowledge, and it has to be contextualized. So that's where it gets a little fuzzy, because like this is like somebody mentioned, one of you I think mentioned TikTok, where it's like now you've got all these like Italian TikTok witches, right, who are like young people like doing spells on video for people on TikTok. And it's like the original transmission of this information was done very specifically.
Yeah.
At a very specific time. It was actually done on Christmas Eve or sometimes on St. John's Eve. And it was from an elder to a younger, usually a grandmother to a grandchild. It was not meant for mass consumption, right? Like,
Right.
but we don't have that anymore. And so like, how are we going to, we have to change. Like we have to participate, I think, or it will be lost.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's worth saving or worth, at least transmitting in whatever ways we can. And so like books are one of those ways. Like,
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's probably why you wrote or Della Messina, your
Yeah.
book, but to preserve some of those ways, which is cool. I'm excited to see it.
me too.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have you back on to talk more about the book when it's released, but everyone can look out for that Della Messina from Inner Traditions coming out next year.
Yeah, that is a really good. I mean, there's just so much happening right now. It seems like a wide dispersal and well, it's not even the syncretization yet, because it's just like there's so many different strands being broadcast all over. Like on the internet, you can get access to more esoteric texts than anybody ever has been able to. But then there's not the context for it, and there's not like the direct like transmission, and it's kind of like more confusing. But
Well, look, a friend of mine and I were talking about this. So it's like we saw there was somebody who posted, like, I don't know if it was Instagram or whatever. It was like somebody doing Italian folk medicine, a lemon curse or something. And it's like, so like you can put the instructions for a lemon spell on the internet, but that is not going to actually teach you anything about lemon, right? Like when we're talking about like, so like our ancestors, they knew lemon,
right.
They had a relationship with lemon or whatever it is, garlic. And it was a multi-generational relationship and so the logistics of how you say a lemon spell, and I'm just using this as an example. I mean, you could take this anywhere, isn't going to give you that relationship.
Right. Yeah. And so one of the things that one of my teachers, Chris Warnock, who's astrological magic, he talks about is looking at magic as from a cookbook perspective, and to be a master, you have to you have to know the information in the system thoroughly. And oftentimes, like in the past, that would come because you knew the lemon, you knew the ingredients since you were a child and going back, generations. But then once you know those ingredients, you know how they go together, and you know what a talisman should look like or feel like, or what a spell should look and feel like, then you can
Make your own
make your own recipe. Yeah, I personally don't use recipes when I cook, because
Right.
Neither
do I know, and my herbal potions too as well. I mean I did, but I started with like, this is how you do it. And so it's we talk about Benedicari or Italian folk medicine. It's like you start with watching how your ancestors even move, right? You watch the way their hands work around something. So it's like you watch their posture. You watch what they do when something doesn't work out well. You watch them improvise, right? You learn about improvisation. That's like relational. But, I do think because of the circumstances that we're in right now, where we don't have that, like, I do think somebody can like take a lemon spell and really start working with it. But I think it just takes a lot of devotion. I think it takes a lot of devotion and a lot of practice. And I think, but I think if you're really committed to it, you will form a relationship. I mean, it's just like plants, magic. Our ancestors got it from somewhere, right? Like they started with something.
Yeah.
So it's like, we are looking for our origins, but we're also creating our own.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like whatever that human impulse is to reach for magic, if that's what we want to call it, to
Right.
reach for the divine or whatever we want to call it, like, that has not changed, right? It's the same impulse that our ancestors had. And those traditions originated from that impulse.
Mm.
So if we move from there in a way that's really honest, and really constantly asking ourselves and self-reflecting, and then listening, I think we can do it, and I think we have to.
Mm.
Yeah.
So in other words, like, I think this needs to also be accessible. So like we can't, like, we're not gonna, we're not, I don't see this happening where we're gonna just all of a sudden, like, everybody's gonna go back to living this like idyllic village life with, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Well, not anytime soon.
Mhm.
In our lifetimes.
Mhm.
Who knows what's gonna happen.
True.
But
That's the other reason for it. So that's the other
right.
reason for it,
Yeah.
is that we don't know what's going to happen. And these tools are things that will help us to survive.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So what does magic mean to you?
Magic means to me that I am in attunement with the divine forces of creation as much as I possibly can be.
Mm.
I like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that a lot. I feel that.
So it's presence.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's being in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That connection. Yeah.
Yeah. The conversation, I think, is an important element because it is like relationship. Yeah.
Mm. So
Yeah.
you mentioned that you have students and that you make herbal medicines. And so if people want to find out more about you and about what you do, and if they want to get in touch for either herbal medicine or astrology, or learning from you, where's the best place for folks to find you?
therootcircle.com, my website. I have a Patreon. There's stuff happening on there.
Awesome. Is that the Root Circle on Patreon?
I think, I'm not
You can
sure.
find it on your website.
Yeah, I think I'm calling it Della Medicina, but you can find the link to my Patreon on my website. I'm also usually active on Instagram at the Root Circle on Instagram. Those are like the two main places. But yeah, anything that's happening for the winter until like April will be, I am going to be teaching in Sicily in June.
Awesome.
Nice.
And to find out about that, you can go to their website, which is, it's Mary Beth Bonfilio. You can go to marybethbonfilio.com.
Okay.
Or find Mary Beth Bonfilio on Instagram.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much again, Lisa. This has been fantastic. And it's so nice to actually get to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you
Through
too.
the internet. Yeah. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again.
Yep, you too.